John Carpenter's The Thing is one of my favorite horrors of all time. The paranoia, suspense, and dread are handled spectacularly, perhaps greater than any story I've seen before and since. It was always a story that left me wanting more as well, since unlike most horrors or classic sci-fi films of the time, it never garnered a sequel. Probably for the best considering how most such sequels panned out. But I digress. For years, one of the things I always wished to know was, what happened at the Norwegian camp? We see bare glimpses, but are otherwise left to guess. Just how did they find their visitor? How did it first break out? How did their excitement turn to horror and their eventual doom? The Thing always felt like a sequel to a film we never got to see. It was a story I always wished to know, always left to guess at. That is, until 2011's The Thing was set to come out. Finally, answers to my questions. Of course, not all were so enthralled with the idea. Many considered it to be an attempt at a remake or reboot, an era where many such films tried and failed to do just that. I disagreed on the ground that it was a prequel, not a remake, and could be a great tie-in to a classic. Some thought that since we knew how it all ends, what's the point? I thought the journey is the reward. After all, there are many stories I'll experience more than once which I know the ending to. Execution is king. People saw the addition of Americans as a cheap cop-out, though I figured, and still believe, it was a reasonable excuse to get people who'd otherwise be speaking a different language talking English instead. Let's face it, an entirely subtitled movie just wouldn't have gone down. Even with my optimism, though, I did understand one thing. This film had to be nigh perfect. The film needed to retread the same senses of paranoia, suspense, and dread without straight copying the previous film, and needed to fulfill a number of circumstances to allow the plot to mesh correctly with its predecessor. Not too difficult a problem considering there wasn't over much of the Norwegian camp. The checklist was relatively simple, in large part thanks to how destroyed the camp was. But they had to get it right. And they didn't. Not even close. It's not just the linking of the two films. For the most part, they do manage to accomplish that, if sloppily. It's the feel of everything. There are check boxes they wish to hit without consideration for how they mesh with the rest of the film. It's like they wanted to tell their own story and were bogged down with having to integrate certain aspects of its predecessor, while at the same time overly relying on things which made the film great. The result was a mess. It begins all right enough. A few researchers stumble across an alien ship by complete chance. Next thing we know, an outside scientist is being requisitioned to come in and take a look-see at a recovered specimen. This makes sense for the most part. It would make sense to bring in a specialist to excavate the specimen, just as it makes sense the researchers wish to keep quiet at the start so as to better claim the glory of the find. It also doesn't stretch credulity that an American might try to attach themselves to the group out of school. What doesn't make much sense is that neither the glory-seeker scientist nor said student were present for the find. A big fuss is made in both films about how difficult it is to contact anyone on the continent, much less on the complete other side of the world without going there yourself. What's more, it's adding 2 more faces to the necessary 10 and plus 1 they already have going, meaning you're splitting up characterization to now dangerous levels. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but strange little inconsistencies like this add up. Hell, it's not even a detail to be noticed until later in the film. No, it was the next scene which had me gritting my teeth a bit. We're in a helicopter going to the Norwegian camp, where apparently people can fly without any hearing protection and can easily speak and be heard. But it's the wrong helicopter, piloted by, you guessed it, a few Americans. All of whom have larger roles than most of the Norwegians, and all of whom should by all rights not be there. So our cast reaches 16, 5 of whom happen to be Americans the film focuses heavily upon, especially during that key development period which is the beginning of a film. Then we reach Thule Base and most of the Norwegians are introduced, a couple of whom don't get a line far beyond, "Hi, nice to meet you." And off in the corner, playing with the base's only dog, is Lars, conveniently the only one who doesn't speak English. "Hey, I wonder who might survive. Which of these Norwegians might be the one from the beginning of the other The Thing film? You know, the one who couldn't speak English and who was chasing a dog?" Lost in all these introductions of the characters in camp is the original helicopter from the film. More on that later, for we have come to the alien spaceship, which hasn't been dug out with thermite for some reason. Okay, whatever, so we go back to base. They talk about how to extract the specimen they found, extracted off screen, and then it's off to begin the defrosting. But wait! First, the head honcho wishes to take a tissue sample, against the recommendations of the specialist they brought in. He then reprimands her for daring to question him and tells her she is not allowed to think, or apparently do the job he specifically brought her in for. If you hadn't guessed, this is the human antagonist of the film, and he is bad. To be fair, this sort of character isn't terrible. He's a glory hunter, the one who causes much of the trouble because he wants to keep the discovery to himself, to be that singular name which they call out when a Nobel Prize is handed over. Issue being, nobody ever calls him out on this, and he never really develops further than this or does anything effectual beyond this opening. He's a dick. Then he's more of a dick. Then he's a dick which may or may not be the Thing. Then he's taken by the Thing and serves as the face of the final monster because he's a bad guy. Which, of course, stands exactly counter to the problem with her protagonist. She's too effectual. Now, mind you, MacReady suffered from this a bit too in the previous rendition. He was never really wrong, and many of the solutions and problem-solvings came through him. But he also wasn't alone in this, and much of this came down to either the lack of trust in the current leadership and a quiet respect he's long earned with the group, or after he takes control of the survivors. Kate has a hand in every positive development for the human side. She figures out the nature of the Thing. She finds out it spits out inorganic objects, then finds said inorganic objects. She's the one who waves down the helicopter trying to leave, figures out the way they use to determine who's not a thing, kills off nearly all the monsters by her lonesome. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The sample is taken and everyone's partying and having a great time. Glory Hole gives a speech. Survivor declares, in Norwegian, that they found an alien! Woo! Then it's Kate talking with the Americans. She wants something better than the cough syrup they're serving, so American 1 tells American 3 to go fetch the good stuff from the chopper. Meanwhile, American 2 goes to take a look at the Thing. A misplaced jump scare with a Norwegian literally just saying, "Boo!" later, and the Thing explodes from the ice and through the ceiling, somehow leaving the rest of the block intact, making so much commotion that American 3 can hear it all the way from the helicopter. Yet the others don't hear a thing from just down the hall. No, they need convincing that the creature was alive and now roaming the camp. Gee, I wonder if it gets anybody, such as the only person which happens to be alone. The group splits off and searches the camp, with a couple finding the creature tucked under a building. This after the remains of the dog are found. Impales one man, pulling him into its waiting maw in what I admit is one of the greatest moments of fear, pain, and desperation I've seen as a doomed, practically nameless researcher who had barely said more than "hi" clings to the building, hopelessly trying not to die. Then everyone comes running, sees what's happening, and the Americans start shooting, much to the chagrin of Glory Hole. When that doesn't seem to do much, they throw some kerosene on it and light it in whatever shack it happens to be dismantling on fire. Everyone's left reeling, but Glory Hole persists, believing they should do an examination. American 1 says they should just destroy the thing they think is already dead because, sure. So the group does their little examination with Glory Hole and Kate at center stage, and they find nameless Ouijan 1 to have been partially digested, though his tissue looks brand new. Also, a brace in his arm has suddenly been spat out, which is not a bad idea. It's actually a little ingenious. See, the thing never has copied inorganic material. It would often tear through clothes to get to somebody, so this proves a new and rather ingenious way to figure things out going forward. Anywho, nameless Ouijan lady can't bear to watch, so she runs off to be alone, while American 3, the only guy to have been alone in all this, goes to comfort her. I wonder if anything happens. Well, the exam is finished and American 1 decides to take the guy who watched Nameless Ouijan 1 die to get medical attention, even though he wasn't injured in the slightest. Apparently, he's in really bad shape. Okay. We get a few cuts putting suspicion on the guy, even though he never at any point was in any sort of contact with the thing or anyone who could be the thing. In the meantime, Kate looks at the sample she took from the thing, which she then shows to her buddy, American research dude, and nobody else. It's alive, she finds, and consuming and taking over Nameless Ouijan 1's also, for whatever reason, still alive cells, copying them perfectly. Meanwhile, Nameless Ouijan 2 is loaded onto the chopper and off they go. But wait! Kate has found some bloody fillings in the bathroom. Because apparently before telling anyone else what she saw, she needed to visit the sink. Behind the curtain, an enormous blood splatter. Dun, dun, dun! She rushes out to stop the chopper, waving them down. After some hesitation, they decide to land. Nameless Ouijan 2 asks suspiciously if something is wrong, and American 3 reassures him comfortingly. Then transforms into a monstrosity, causing the chopper, which was hovering directly over the camp, to crash into the distance. Like miles away distance, behind some mountains. The group gets together and decides to try to mount a rescue, but Kate stops them. Nobody can leave, she says. The alien is copying people, and one of them is a thing, because someone cleaned the blood she saw earlier. American research dude can verify because he saw the cells. Only he's a wuss, so she gets dismissed and the group sets out to mount a rescue. But wait, Nameless Ouijan lady says she saw another guy act suspiciously. Cue cut of a guy acting suspiciously, and has something to show Kate, in a secluded back room. Kate follows her by leaving her there, where the only other person in this place to be alone with the thing at some point suddenly and surprisingly and excruciatingly slowly transforms. Kate, frightened, does a slow turn as the thing fully reveals itself, finally turning around just in time to dodge it trying to tackle her. She runs down the hall where Nameless Ouijan 3 turns the corner to see the commotion, only to be brutally impaled. Luckily, Lars is there to save the day, rushing down the hall with a ready flamethrower. What the fuck? In case you missed the tone of my voice, this entire sequence is horseshit. This is not the Thing monster John Carpenter brought to us. See, the original Thing was exceedingly patient and careful. It didn't take people every single time they were alone. It stalked the base, got the lay of the land. It could be alone with people for hours, but it waited, and waited, and eventually took somebody which no one would expect. And when it did take them, it did so quietly. It didn't transform in front of them, it didn't need to. A little more than a touch could bring someone down eventually if it so chose. It only transformed when it was revealed in front of a group, when the dogs sniffed it out, when Copper was mistakenly hurting it, when one got sniffed out during Mac's test, or during the finale when he was about to blow it up. It was also not a gory killer. Sure, it was grotesque, and when the thing itself was killed, it was done in a gory manner, but it did not leave messes. The only exception being the Copper incident, which was a special circumstance, as well as Bennings, who was caught mid-transformation and cleaned up in literal seconds. Why would it leave a bloody trail when it could just take over every cell in your body and leave no trace behind? Here it is impatient, stupid, leaves messes. I get the need to take a new host as soon as it escaped, as its alien form wasn't exactly covert, but then why didn't it simply take American 3's body instead of splitting itself as it did? Why did it then attack in the helicopter? Why transform behind Kate instead of simply grabbing her? Why did the fillings have blood on them? Why was there any blood spatter left behind? Even the ripped clothing and previous victims never had a speck of blood, but here we're left to believe it would leave behind an enormous bloody mess which would have to be wiped clean. It's so dumb and leaves the monster a predictable villain for most of the film. Then there's the flamethrower and it's just... come on. I get it, a flamethrower is actually useful to clear out ice. But isn't that what they were supposed to have the thermite for? And it made a little sense the Americans would have one since it could be assumed they requisitioned one from the military base stationed nearish by. More importantly, do we really want to regurgitate that much from the other film when they could have come up with something new? And more, why in the fuck is Lars running down the hallway with a flamethrower all of a sudden? Anyway, so the group comes together and formulates a plan of what to do next. They decide they need to quarantine themselves, finally, disable the remaining vehicles, and find a test to run. While they do this, they decide to split off into groups of 2, the most dangerous number for getting people infected. Glory Hole and American Research Dude prepare the test while Kate and Lars head out to disable the snow crawlers. There, Lars takes her to a shack where he shows her a supply of grenades he has. Grenades. What in the... Look, in the original, the Norwegians didn't have grenades. They had thermite, which they attempted to weaponize. Why in the fuck would military-grade grenades be in the middle of a research base? Lost in this is the fact that the group never even tries to contact anyone else and tell them something's up. So we're left to believe the group split into pairs and most of them diddled themselves while only 2 groups did anything. Except for Nameless Norwegian 4, who shows up creepily and alone, without question, to ask if everything's alright. Whatever. The trio spot the Americans returning from their helicopter crash and... how the fuck did they survive? The Thing, a creature which needs to be killed down to the last cell, doesn't make it, but these 2 come out without a single scratch. There's no way. But what really kills me about this scene is everyone's reaction. Majority are legitimately paranoid and decide to quarantine the pair, while the Americans, without knowing what's going on or having anything explained to them, call BS. The others need their help because a bunch of eggheads can't possibly handle what they saw. Okay, and what the hell is this unarmed pair of cargo pilots going to do? We'll get back to that question shortly. We return to the base where the blood test has been destroyed. Oh no, shock of shocks. Whoever could have done this, and why did they leave the test alone? This isn't like the original where the blood was contaminated by the time the idea was formed. These guys conveniently left the test alone. Better question, how did anyone get away doing it? We'll get back to this as well. On the spot, Kate comes up with a legitimately decent idea. Check people's fillings. If they have fillings, they can't be a thing since it rejects them. Half the group passes while the other half is backed in a corner at the end of a pair of flamethrowers because, of course, some people actually take care of their teeth. Which does make good sense. The scene is decent for its ingenuity, but it is a poor attempt to replicate what the previous film attempted to do. That was the climax of all the paranoia. Here, everyone feels confused, going along with a plan they don't altogether grasp or entirely believe in. Why aren't those who know they don't have fillings arguing harder, pointing the obvious flaws in the logic sooner, trying to shoot this down immediately so they don't have a gun pointed at them? But no, they're put into a corner quietly while Lars and Nameless Norwegian 5 go to test the Americans. Then they start arguing with the remaining flamethrower dude who I actually remember the name of because he came with a bit of personality. Peter is torn between compassion between those he's worked with and the woman he just met trying to convince him her theory is on point. The argument is sudden, rather intense, and probably the best showcase of the film's paranoia on display. While that situation begins to boil, Lars finds the Americans have escaped. When he attempts to find them, they ambush him, and this is how he survives. Some douche knocks him out before the climax, and he spends the rest of the film asleep. Nameless Norwegian 5 runs back and tells the others, and tensions rise quickly. Everyone begins yelling at Peter, cause why not, with those at gunpoint trying to not be at gunpoint, I guess, and Kate telling him to keep them at gunpoint, while everyone forgets for a moment these American dudes are now running around with a freaking flamethrower. Not so when the window crash is heard down the hall, but not the roof exploding, right? And Peter runs off to hunt them down with everyone else following behind. The next bit is just dumb. Americans demand Peter drop his flamethrower. Yeah, he's really gonna do that after you attacked one of his companions. And nobody tries in the slightest to offer explanation or de-escalate the situation. It's just two sides yelling incomprehensible nothing at one another, and it's stupid. Not so much because of the paranoia, but because I cannot fathom what the Americans are possibly trying to accomplish. The main group seems to have an idea down. They're weaponized with freaking flamethrowers, but for some reason the Americans have this idea to break out and... But by the same token, at no point is anyone trying to offer explanation or reason. They give these dramatic, curt sentences which are great for trailers and pissing people off, but nobody would ever realistically state. Well, long story short, American 2 shoots Peter, killing him luckily with a hell of a dome shot without getting either blasted with the flamethrower. Nameless Legion 4, checking on his friend, blows up because the flamethrower was ruptured. Helping him to the main room, it turns out he was the thing, as his arm breaks free and grabs Nameless Legion 5. He screams at the detached arm for a minute. It screams back. He screams some more instead of tossing it away. It gives him a lovely kiss. The room erupts into chaos as Nameless Legion 6 and Glory Hole run away. The thing cripples American research dude and bonds with him to create the monster seen in the previous film, and fatally wounds American 2 while the flamethrower decides to stop working. You know, just like the other film. Luckily, Kate knows how to fix flamethrowers and chases it off and kills off a couple detached limbs. So let's go back to our previous questions, eh? Just what can a couple of cargo pilots do? Kill one guy, potentially kill another, give the thing the prime chance to kill two others and one of your own, and escape while everyone's distracted with their heroics. Cue the slow clap. What about the thing? How does it get away with destroying the test? Excellent question. As we find out, Nameless Legion 4 was the only thing left, and the group was paired off, so... movie magic? Nah, this was the same guy who wandered off alone to interrupt Kate and Lars a bit earlier, but he never got called out for wandering around by his lonesome because that'd just be obvious. The scene turns out comical. There's no reason the thing had to reveal itself here. We've seen them play dead before, so why not now? Why is it attacking in the middle of so many people with a freaking flamethrower pointed at it? Why is Nameless Legion 5 just screaming at this hand on his arm? His struggle with it is comical, like a fight you'd see in a sitcom between a guy and an inanimate object. Or the damage caused. All these corpses are piling up quick, but there's no real damage being done to the structure. Yet this was much of the mystery of the previous film. There was massive structural damage, but the only corpses anyone found were that of Nameless Legion 6 and the monster. Here they're strewn about left and right, and goddamn this flamethrower bit. Are we really expected to believe the same exact thing happened again at the most inconvenient time? Whatever. The thing finds Glory Hole and the power goes off because why the hell not? Nameless Legion 6 looks around nervously, and that's the last we see of him until the final scene where we find he kills himself. Apparently, they didn't want to promote suicide by showing his. This leaves us with the two main Americans to save the day, hunting the thing throughout the compound and apparently without a worry over the fact that the power is dead. American 1 chops one of the limbs with an axe because they needed to tie that part in, and it's enough to bloody the weapon, which he then leaves in fear of contamination. Kate then blasts it with her flamethrower. The two wordlessly split up because drama. No, really, they just walk away from one another silently even though only one of them is armed. And the thing chases down American 1 only to be saved at the last second by Kate, who burns it to a crisp. Crashes through a wall into the snow where she burns it some more with a flamethrower. Not the kerosene as seen in the original, no. just a blast with a flamethrower. And all this is apparently enough to cause the destruction of Thule Camp, because that's the end of the damage done here. Now it's off to hunt down Glory Hole Thing, who has taken a snowcrawler and... Wait, hadn't all the vehicles been disabled? Did the writers really just forget they disabled all the vehicles 20 minutes ago? We're almost done. Not much more to get through. Just some of the dumbest parts. Okay, so Kate and American One follow Glory Hole Thing back to the spaceship, because apparently it worked all along, despite the crash landing and creature attempting to escape the wreckage. Yeah. The ship turns on, and shockingly, the pair become separated. Kate is left to battle a cheap CG monster for a few minutes, finished off Michael Bay style with a fiery grenade, which managed to blow up the Thing in the spaceship, just in time for American One to show up and watch the destruction. But wait, American One is missing the earring he's worn since the beginning. He must be a Thing. Even though an earring is a piece of clothing the Thing could have easily attached back on, leaving the final reveal questionable at best. Kate blasts him with a flamethrower and gets in the other snowcrawler as the screen goes black and we're left to wonder. Where were these two snowcrawlers during the other film? But we're not done yet, no. A few credits later and the helicopter arrives at Thule Station. Yes, that helicopter. The one I told you to make note of way at the beginning of this. And yeah, a character makes mention of it earlier, but such a throwaway line and such a blatant hand wave that, no. Lars shoots at the pilot with a scoped rifle and demands to see his fillings. Then the dog runs off and our last scene leads directly into the rest of the story, bringing us to questions like, where was the helicopter and pilot this whole film? Where was the dog the whole film? Where was the scoped rifle the whole film? Oh, right. I see. They had to tie it to the other movie, so they threw them each in at the last second. Got it. See what I mean when I say the writers wanted to make their own film, but were tied down to making it a tie-in, all the while retreading much of the same ground? There's good ideas here, but no foresight or follow-through. Just a loose interpretation they connected the Carpenter's rendition with a couple hand waves. I'd love to say the film could have easily been fixed, that perhaps a good edit might have saved it, but looking back at all this, no. While not a complete wash, the film lacks too much. So, what could have saved it? For starters, streamlining the characters. Combine Edvard and Sander to create one character named Sander. Then get rid of the American pilots and one of the nameless Norwegian dudes, say this one. There. We now have a more centralized cast which focuses upon the discoverers of the Thing. Now spend more time digging it up. Show them using thermite to uncover the ship. They're finding the creature and pulling it loose. Let's see their excitement throughout the discovery, not just the after-party celebrations. Make us forget, for even a moment, that we're in a horror film. Make us like these characters and be excited for what they've accomplished as we grow to know a bit about them. As well, don't have one non-English speaker. Give us at least 2, possibly 3, to make the survivor somewhat unpredictable. By the time the Thing breaks loose, we should be close to a comfort zone. And there's the fun part, they don't even have to tell us it got loose. It could be a mid-film plot twist. Eventually, someone is caught mid-change, but even this doesn't have to be the big reveal. This could be Collins, our eventual suicide, who sees this and runs, trying to convince others what he saw, unsuccessfully because who'd believe it, which in turn makes him a paranoid mess. But then we see the ice block and the dog acting very aggressive towards some of the group, eventually revealing the monster. They try to fight it conventionally, hacking it as it flails about, cutting it to pieces and leaving the group desperately frightened. Just what is happening and how? The creature is alive? Is free from the ice? How long has that been going on? How many people were exposed? The added time, the level it interacts with others even when originally exposed, even brings to question its nature. If people are still alive as it, or if they could tell themselves apart. The camp devolves into paranoia as people question each other and even the nature of the thing. Is the person standing next to you real? If you were a thing, would you even know?
Violence breaks out.
One person, say Peter, begins a killing spree only to find that while conventional weapons don't work, fire does, resulting in a creature we eventually see recovered. Now here's another fun bit. The Norwegians don't have a flamethrower. They used kerosene and thermite for the ice, and that's their weapon against the thing. Our psycho Norwegian begins blowing the place apart with thermite only to eventually be taken, the rest helpless to stop it. They break out a hunting rifle which seems powerful enough to hurt it at least, and chase it off with thermite. With the cold now seeping in, the survivors take stock. Collins kills himself, believing himself to be one of them. Kate then comes up with her solution, a check for fillings. More on this later. Most have them, a couple don't, and are locked into a building which is then doused in kerosene and burned, to the mixed screams of human and thing. And we see just how far the survivors are willing to go, how frightened they are. The rest go hunting. They release the dog, who has been aggressive toward it the entire time, and follow behind by helicopter, the group managing to eventually corner the creature, half frozen already, and kill it. Then, plot twist, Kate was a thing all along. The one who came up with the test only performed the test on herself in front of the other thing which was revealed, showing just how far the thing, in turn, is willing to go to survive. With their guard down and separated from their equipment, she takes out one of the group as the final pair narrowly escapes to their weapons. Frozen half to death themselves, it's all they can do to trap it with lit kerosene and end it. As the exhausted survivors take off in their chopper, however, they notice a dog running into the distance. Cue credits. Perhaps not perfect, and certainly not the only way the story could be told, but imagine if filmmakers actually integrated a story with this much horror and paranoia, this many differences while still telling a congruent continuation. A film which might even be able to stand on its own and add to the mythology of the universe in its own unique way. Sure, it wouldn't fix everything, such as the stilted dialogue, the horrible CG, or the questionable directing, but if only, right?